Hey everyone, this is Mike, and today I'm going to be talking about what gear you should be bringing into old ultimates. Now when I say old ultimates or old content in general, I'm meaning content that you get synced down for, because of course we currently have higher item level gear than is allowed into Alexander Ultimate, so you either use the old gear or you get synced down with your current gear, meaning that it is old content. So if I ever use that term again, I don't mean content that is outdated or something like that, I just mean stuff that you get synced down for. Now the main reason why I wanted to kind of talk about the subject is because I expect a lot more people to be going into those older ultimates because of a few reasons. First of all, 5.3 is not going to have an ultimate rate this time around. They did let us know about that one. If we're gonna get one, it's probably 5.5, which is going to be my expectation of when that's gonna come out. And 5.3 is also going to be delayed a few weeks because of the coronavirus situation. Now, because there is more time, because there is no next ultimate, I am expecting a lot more people to basically go try ultimate out. When we look at Alexander Ultimate, it is the ultimate that has the highest clear rate, so there is a lot more people that are getting interested in trying ultimate out and seeing how there is now going to be a little bit of a content drought when it comes down to high-end raid content. I am expecting a lot more people to basically go back into some of the older ultimates, whether it be Stormblood ultimates or Alexander Ultimate, and basically go and try it out to see for themselves what the content is like before they maybe jump into the next one in 5.5 or something like that. And whenever you go into an ultimate fight, you want to be as prepared as possible when it comes down to gear, food, potions, all of those kind of things, because they are still hard fights, they are the hardest fights in the game, and you do want to have as much prepared as possible to increase your odds of clearing that fight. And gear is one of the big ones. Now, when it comes down to food and potions, I'll quickly tell you this right now. Basically use the latest what is possible. Food always has increased stats, and these things do not get synced down, so to speak. So food and potions, use the last ones available, those will still have their full effect. Unless maybe like you go into UCOP or something like that, and you don't actually have enough stats to benefit from the increase of the potion or something like that. But in general, you can just use the latest potion and you'll be fine. Now, when it comes down to gear, however, there are a lot more options available to you, especially when it came down to Stormblood back in the day. Right now, when you go back into Stormblood, it's very simple. Just use the gear that you currently have in Shadowbringers, because when we went from Stormblood to Shadowbringers, they changed how main stat materia worked. Well, they just removed it altogether. And because of that, they changed the gear formula. And because of that, we are now much stronger when we get synced down into level 70, 60 or 50 content, because they basically had to make up for the fact that we can't melt main stat materia anymore. So if you're doing UCOP or UWU, just use the current gear that you have right now. Any gear from Shadowbringers works basically, and you're going to be much stronger than you were back then. So because of that, the DPS check is going to be relatively easy. Or actually way too easy for an ultimate fight in my opinion. But of course the mechanics are still there, so the fights are still challenging, because of course they are mainly a mechanical fight, and if you can just get through it without dying, then the DPS check shouldn't really be an issue for any group anymore at this point. So if you're doing an old ultimate from from Stormblood, if you're going into Stormblood, use the gear that you have right now in Shadowbringers. Now, when it comes down to Alexander Ultimate, we currently have two options, and we're gonna have a third option in the future as well. So we can either use the gear that we had back then from Eden's Gate, the item level 470 gear, I think it was, with the 475 weapons, and you just use that with the melts that you had back then, because that way you are going to have the best in slot that was current gear, so to speak, back when Alexander Ultimate came out. Now, because the item level sync is item level 475, there is going to be some things that you can do. So for example, yesterday we ended up clearing again, me and my group, where a lot of people of us were using our new gear from Eden's Verse, and the reason for that is that syncing down is not too bad. When you get synced down, and this is also the reason why they made it item level 475, not item level 470, is because when you sync down, you lose all of your materia slots basically. So all of the substats that you get from materia are gone. Now, because of that, they increase the item level by 5. Because of this, you get extra main stat. So if you're getting synced down with your new gear, you're going to get more main stat, means more vitality, more damage from your main stat, like for example, higher dexterity, higher intelligence, that kind of stuff. but that is kind of to make up for the fact that you lose, I think it was around 1200 substats from your materia. So that is basically kind of the choice that you have to make. Do you have good enough gear to get the stats that you want in that old content, so to speak, like when it comes down to like a certain GCD tier or something like that? If you are a healer or a tank and you want some direct hit in your gear, then if you're sinking down because there is no like direct hit stats on normal tank and healer gear, you need to meld all of that stuff. So if you want that, you will need to be using some old pieces of gear from the previous raid tier in order to get all of that, if you do want a direct hit stat, for example. But in general, the difference between like using old gear and sinking down with new gear is not that big. I think it is still the best to use the old gear because all of those materia slots that you get access to, but the increase in main stat when you sink down makes it so that the difference is not all that big. So if it's just to try out the ultimate, I would say just use the gear that you currently have, so that you don't need to make that extra investment in grinding out a whole new gear set just to try out ultimate or something like that. However, in the next patch, or maybe a patch from that, I'm not quite sure when it is going to happen, but when we look at the two older ultimates, Yukop and Uwu, whenever there was a new dungeon that came out that dropped the new like item level gear that was the same as the synced gear for the ultimates, meaning that that is going to pretty much be the best in slot for the rest of the expansion for that fight. So when I'm talking about Alexander Ultimate, because of course on Yukop and Uwu this doesn't apply anymore, but when we look at Alexander Ultimate, that thing is synced to item level 475. Now, if you look at raid gear, we are looking at item level 470 gear or item level 480 gear, meaning that there is no sweet spot, so to speak. Now, if the dungeons are going to follow the same pattern as they did back in Stormblood, then I believe the dungeon in 5.3, or maybe the dungeon that comes after that, is going to be dropping gear that is item level 475. And if that is the case, then that is pretty much going to be our best in slot gear for Alexander Ultimate, and then when the next one comes out, maybe we'll have that happen again. The reason why that is going to be our best in slot is because it is going to benefit from the best of two worlds. Because you are not getting synced, because you hit that item level cap, or that maximum item level cap, so to speak, you are going to be able to put melts into that gear. And because it is item level 475 gear, it is going to be giving you those extra main stat, like stats as well, that you don't get from your I-470 gear. So because of that, grinding for dungeon gear is actually going to be a thing if you want to have the best in slot gear for an ultimate fight. Well, of course, when that dungeon comes out, and if the gear is like that, of course, because we don't have that dungeon at the moment. It's just a speculation that I am making from looking at Stormblood ultimates and how that all ended up going. So basically, those are going to be the two options that you have right now, and the third option that will most likely be there in the next patch when that does finally drop. So we have our old gear that you can use, which was the old best in slot, where you get all of your materia slots. We have the gear that you currently have that gets synced down to item level 475, meaning a higher main stat, but the loss of all of your materia slots. And then in the future, we're most likely going to have a dungeon that drops item level 475 gear, which is going to be the best gear available for that ultimate, because it not only allows you to melt the gear with the materia slots, but it also gives you that bigger main stat increase because it hits that item level 470 sweet spot, which is going to be the maximum item level available for that ultimate. And for this one, it's of course Alexander Ultimate. When it comes down to the newest ultimate that is going to come out in the future, I am not expecting there to be dungeon gear available for that one, because it is going to fall so late into the expansion. Because of course, like they did say, it's either going to be patch 5.4 or 5.5. 5.4 is going to have a Savage tier in it, so I wouldn't really see how they would release an ultimate alongside that, because that would be kind of weird. So I am expecting it to be in 5.5, and when we are in that patch, I don't see how we are going to be getting dungeon gear that is on the same item level as that like ultimate cap, so to speak. So that's kind of like what I am thinking. Those are the options available to you, and all of that kind of stuff. So if you have any more questions about this topic, feel free to ask them in the comments and I'll get back to you. But that's pretty much all that you would want to know. Use the latest food and potions. You can either use the old gear that was available back then, you can sync down with your current gear, or you can use the dungeon gear that comes out in the future to have the best gear available for that ultimate. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my Patreons for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next one.